Welcome back. Our last component of this lecture today is going to be about polytheism in India. It's going to be about Hinduism. So here we're going to learn about a Tamil South Indian woman named Arasi. We're going to learn about Hinduism. We're going to learn about goddesses. Well, there was a special edition of a journal called the Journal of the American Academy of Religions, and it was called Who Speaks for Hinduism, in which various scholars said, yogis speak for Hinduism, Brahmins speak for Hinduism, scholars speak for Hinduism, traditional gurus speak for Hinduism. Well, Vasudha Narayana argues instead that goddesses, specifically goddesses and the women who worship these goddesses, and also the men who worship these goddesses, speak for Hinduism. So to break it down in this article called Diglossic Hinduism, Liberation and Lentils, Vasudha Narayana has a topic, and that topic is Hinduism and what are the sources of Hinduism, who are the authorities in Hinduism. Then she has a thesis. Remember, your topic is the problem of an argument, of a paper. Then you have a thesis. The thesis is your solution to the problem. She argues that goddesses, not Brahmins, not scholars, not white guys like me, speak for Hinduism. She says goddesses speak for Hinduism. So topic, problem. What is Hinduism? What is the authorities of Hinduism? What is authentic Hinduism? What are the sources for authentic Hinduism? The thesis or the solution to that problem is goddesses speak for Hinduism. And what is the data that she uses to prove that point? Well, she uses an ethnography or writing about people. She uses an ethnography of a Tamil woman, of a woman from South India. So Narayana tells this story at the beginning of the article that is just delightful, in which she is at Harvard. Now, Vasudha Narayana is South Indian woman. She is a South Indian woman. She went to Harvard to do her PhD. She now teaches in Florida. She goes back to India all the time, does wonderful field work. I recommend all of her books. So Vasudha Narayana tells this story about how she's studying at Harvard, and she meets this guy sort of like in an elevator. And he asks, well, what are you studying? And she says, Hinduism. And he says, I'm studying Hinduism too. And he says, you know, something along the lines of, what do you think the essence of Hinduism is? And she says, I don't know. Let me think about that. I'm like, well, I think it's actually the type of lentils we make. And these certain times of year, we make a certain type of lentils. And another type of year, we make another type of lentil. The word for lentil in almost all the Indian languages is dal. So she says it's really about the different holidays and festivals and the types of foods that we make to commemorate those festivals. And he sort of shakes his head and says, oh, you mean anthropology stuff. Now, as you know, I kind of like anthropology stuff. And I think anthropology stuff, as I think you can see where this is going, is really the essence of any religion. It's what people do. So this gentleman, and of course it's a man, says that the real religion of Hinduism and real religion in general is literature. In Hinduism, it's literature in Sanskrit. So he pretty much says that he studies the myths of the Vedas, the earliest of the Hindu scriptures. And he calls that the real religion, the real Hinduism, a religion that resembles world religions, if not all the other monotheistic world religions. The point of the matter is, he's talking about the study of Indra and Vritra. Indra is a great hero. Vritra is a dragon. Indra slays the dragon. He starts working with that. That's his whole thing for figuring out Hinduism. And she's like, well, I know some Sanskrit. I've never read the Rig Veda. I've heard of Indra. Who's Vritra? So there you have a woman who's a Hindu, and this guy tells her that this is the essence of Hinduism. She goes, I don't even recognize that. Well, scholars have privileged the stories by Brahmins, the priestly caste of elites in India, mostly North Indian Brahmins at that. They privilege Sanskrit scriptures. Sanskrit is the most elite language of India. And all of this is privileged over the lives of Hindus, especially non-elite Hindus, non-sophisticated Hindus, non-urban Hindus. And all of these descriptions of these non-elite, non-urban are relegated to the dustbin of anthropology. Well, I'm a big fan of anthropology. Narayana also argues that native Hindus who write their own textbooks on Hinduism, they also privilege these Sanskrit stories and philosophy and the discourse of Brahmins in the same way that the Westerners do. This is finally changing due to scholars like Vasudha Narayana. She actually also makes this other interesting point. She says that, you know, possession. People are possessed all the time in India. They have goddesses come onto them. They go into trances. But this doesn't happen in any Western temples, in a Hindu temple in the United States. It's almost as if the practice of possession is not able to cross the seas into another place, except in a few rare cases. All right, so Narayana has this wonderful quote right here when the question is posited, who speaks for Hinduism? She says, who then speaks for Hinduism? And whom should we listen to more attentively? I would say, listen to the goddesses, not the demure, circumspect ones, but the dynamic ones who possess and are progressive. Listen also to the exponents of the performing arts, the musicians, the dancers, who think their art not as being derived from the Vedas, but as a method of communicating complex social problems as a web of self-transformation. Now, when we talk about goddesses, this is an intriguing problem in Indian culture. You have sort of three levels of goddesses. So on the left here, we have Lakshmi by Saraswati and Ganesha. Now, Lakshmi is a great goddess. She's known all over India. She has a Sanskrit name, Lakshmi. You can find people doing worship rituals to Lakshmi who brings wealth and auspiciousness in every corner of India. Every Hindu loves Lakshmi. Now you have other gods and goddesses who are sort of regional. These are smaller gods, like you see up here on the right. That's Vaishno Devi. Now, she is worshipped by, the people about 150 miles in any direction. So that's the god over many, many villages, but not pan-Indian. These are goddesses that tend to be a little wilder. They tend to be the ones you go to, not for general auspiciousness, but, to get you specific ends. If, let's say, you need a really good score on a test, or you need to unify your community, or you need to offer an animal sacrifice, these goddesses often take animal sacrifices. Furthermore, even down further, and we're going to talk about these levels of goddesses a lot when we talk about Hinduism. You have the local goddesses. So up here in the center, you see all these snakes and the goddesses around them. This is in Kerala. And you see this often, they call it a kua, and that's where you have these local goddesses symbolized by snakes and stones. These are the goddesses that live near your house. They have influence over maybe a mile in every direction. These are the ones you go to when you've lost your goat, or you don't have any food for your livestock, or you have illness or disease in your family. You go to them specifically. So we have a range of goddesses, the translocal ones that all of India knows, the regional ones that small regions have, they're more closer to your pragmatic ends as opposed to transcendental ends. And you have the local goddesses who are right in your neighborhood. And those are the goddesses that you go to with your most immediate and pressing problems. So to learn a little bit more about how these goddesses who speak for Hinduism operate, Vasudha Narayana tells us about Arasi. Now, I'm sure that, I don't know the exact details on this, but I think Arasi is probably a composite of many women that she's met and done field work with, but I wouldn't put it beyond the field of doubt that Arasi is a very specific woman who Vasudha Narayana knows and hung out with and got this great sort of story about her. So I like to think about Arasi. When I think about Hinduism, I think about a woman. I think about her being devout. I think about her going to temples. And I think about her being immediately concerned with her family's well-being and the well-being of her immediate clan. These are sort of the core Hindus for me. These are more village Hindus. And they make up 70% of the population of India. That's not to say that the top 30% who go to grand temples and chant in Sanskrit aren't Hindus. It's just that we've studied them quite a bit. I'm more interested in these specific women, and I'm more interested in their everyday lives. So Arasi, intriguingly, all the structures and divisions that we consider key to Hinduism are unknown to Arasi. They're merely mostly irrelevant to her life. She doesn't know her caste, whether she's a Brahmin or a Shudra or a Kshatriya, but her upper caste neighbors say she is a laborer, a Shudra, or the lowest caste. Now, I want you to note that in South India, you don't really have the four castes, the Brahmins, the priests, the Kshatriyas, the landowners and the barons, the Vaishyas, the merchants and the farmers, and the Shudras, the laborers. You really have almost a binary. You're a Brahmin or you're a Shudra. It's just not as developed as well. So you're the priest or a laborer. All right, she doesn't use the word Hindu, in fact. She wouldn't call herself a Hindu. And that's sort of intriguing because other folks call her a Hindu. Now, note that the term Hindu is not a common term in India until about 300 years ago. We don't find it in any of the earlier scriptures than that. And I'll talk about that more when we get specifically to Hinduism in our next lecture. Our next lecture for, later in the module, not today. All right, so who are the goddesses that she worships, that Arasi worships? Well, like I said, she's very devout. She worships a specific goddess called Periya Palayat Amman. Amman just means mother. So she is the mother of Peria Palayat, which is the name of a village. She is autochthonous and she is autonomous. Autochthonous, so chthonic means like the ground, and auto means self. So it's like she's risen from the ground on her own. She's autonomous. She doesn't have a husband. She's not the consort to anyone. She's a goddess on her own of a place. One of the things you find about about goddesses and gods in general in Hinduism is they're often connected to a place. So you have the Bhairava of Chalkambi Chowk in Varanasi. So you'll have Bhairavas all over the place, but that one's the Bhairava of that place. Or you could have the Hanuman of Connaught Place, an English sounding name. So Connaught Place is in New Delhi. It's a big market. And there's a specific Hanuman there, the monkey god. And they say, oh, that's the Connaught Place Hanuman. So you'll have Hanuman, the monkey god, that's everywhere and you can encounter him. But you also have the Hanuman of a specific place. Or you have the Bhairava that's all over the place and the Bhairava of a specific place. Sometimes they don't even have a Sanskrit name like this goddess, who's just merely the mother of Peria Palayat. So these deities of a place are the ones that people have the closest interactions with, and they often don't have Sanskrit or Tamil or any type of name and are just referred to as Mam or Bap. Does that sound familiar? Indo-European linguistics, Mam and Pap. So these goddesses are a little tricky. During the month of Adi, which is the 15th of July to the 14th of August, people make offerings of rice to these types of goddesses. And specifically, Arasi makes offerings to Peria Palayat's sister, who's another nearby goddess. She needs to be cooled down. And this time that these goddesses sort of heat up, it's thought that if they are not cooled, they will cause disease, hardship, or withering. A shrinking, shoshana is the word in Sanskrit. So what happens during the heat of the summer is the animals get all skinny and withered. And then in the winter times, the opposite of how it is in our world, they get sort of fat because it's not so hot and there's plenty of food. So they call it withering happens as the goddesses heat up, just like the sun heats up and it withers us. So offerings of milk and cooling substances calm down these goddesses and make them beneficent, make them give grace. If you don't, when they haven't done this in the past, Arasi says one year they didn't do these sort of offerings, and during that very time, everybody got sick. On Tuesdays, Arasi goes to a dargah. Now, a dargah is a Sufi shrine. Sufis are Muslims, they're mystic Muslims. So she goes to the Sufi mystic Muslim dargah, this shrine at the grave of a saint. She doesn't know his name, but she knows he's powerful. While folk often argue that Hindus and Muslims have nothing in common, many Hindus attend Sufi shrines. These are shrines to mystic saints who have died, but are still thought to be able to dispense grace and powerful miracles. So this quote-unquote Hindu woman every Tuesday goes to a Muslim site, all in search of power and grace from the divine. So there are some larger regional goddesses that Arasi is really into. The one we have described by Vasudha Narayana is a goddess by the name of Adipara Shakti. Now, Adipara Shakti is a Sanskrit name. It means something like the foremost supreme power goddess. Now, there's a town about 50 miles away from Arasi called Melmelavatur, and this is where the goddess Adipara Shakti lives. And she represents the ways goddesses evolved. Now, originally, this was a small shrine to a local goddess, sort of like Peria Palayatama. But over time in the 1970s, men and women started coming there all the time and calling her a high goddess. This local goddess gets a Sanskrit name, and she's identified with the great goddess that you can find everywhere. Now, in this shrine community, there's even a man who is a devotee, a very great devotee, and he's considered to be the goddess on earth. He is an incarnation of this Adipara Shakti, of this goddess who is here. Now, goddesses regularly possess people who act as their oracles, speaking for them. It must be noted that when a man as opposed to a woman is possessed in this way, it shows the goddess is gaining greater purity and wider appeal and greater sophistication. Now, in this new version of a goddess like Peria Palayat Amman, this Adipara Shakti has sort of innovative qualities here. The goddess is said to be everywhere in the area, not just in the little shrine. It's also said in this area that 21 siddhas, or perfected ones, attained salvation. The siddhas in Indic culture, especially in the South, are sort of like humans who become superheroes through their piety and their religious practices. All people who come there, whether male or female, are addressed by the staff and by the folks who hang out there as Shakti. So they would just look at me and say, hey, Shakti. They would call me, hey, Shakti. Shakti means, is a feminine word that means sort of divine power. The whole place is staffed not by Brahmin priests, as you would find at a more sophisticated, or actually at a comparable place to this temple, there would be Brahmin priests. But here there are no Brahmin priests. They're in fact female volunteers that perform all the rituals and run everything. There's no taboo on menstruation. Generally in Hinduism, if a woman is menstruating, she is not allowed to enter the Garbhagriha, the center of the temple, or go on the temple grounds in general for several reasons. Some people argue it's because she's impure. Some people argue it's because when women are menstruating, they are exceptionally attractive and they will distract not only the men, the human men, but the gods by their overt sexuality. That's neither here nor there. We'll talk about menstruation some more, I'm sure. The rituals that the goddesses, that are performed for the goddess, are for the betterment of the world and of mankind. Her services are progressive. They are forward thinking, we could say, with rites performed against drought, increasing natural resources, whereas the other goddesses, the smaller goddesses, are specifically like getting rid of diseases, finding my lost goat, you know, making sure I have a child. This will be a distinction that I'll bring up later called the difference between transcendental and pragmatic religious outcomes. She also endorses and is thought herself to perform the work that is done under her name. This is humanitarian work, vocational training, medical camps, AIDS outreach, and tree planting. Now, to add to this, and as my last point I wanted to make about some of these goddesses, we have a very new goddess who was formed in 1989, the World's AIDS Day. And this is AIDS Amma. There are a number of AIDS Ammas around. So mother of AIDS, the mother who can cure AIDS. So there was a small local goddess, sort of like Periya, Paliyat, and this science teacher saw these stones and he made another image of two outlines of people with a little virus in between it. People come and worship there with fresh flowers, incense, and kolam diagrams. Kolam diagrams are just like little diagrams that people draw on rice flour on the floor, and they're thought to be offerings to the gods. Children come very often and they sing bhajans. Bhajans are holy songs, but these songs are filled with AIDS education info. There are a large string of goddesses in India that are associated with diseases. The most famous one is Shitala, which means the cool one. Shitala is often found in Bengal, but all over India. And she's the smallpox goddess. The idea was that you need to worship the goddess of smallpox so you don't get smallpox, but don't worship her too much because she'll give you smallpox. When smallpox was eradicated in India, we found that people still worship Shitala for various reasons, or other skin eruptions such as chickenpox, or when you lose melatonin in your skin. So these disease goddesses hang around, and Shitala, in fact, in other places, she and another goddess named Yelama are associated with AIDS as well, because AIDS causes disruptions of the skin. In 2020, we've started to see a rise of COVID goddesses. Yes, the coronavirus is getting its own goddess. And these are starting to form kind of all over India as people are dealing with the crisis in 2020. And they're finding ways to create new goddesses to ward off dreadful diseases and viruses. It's over. Go have a tea, a soda, a whiskey, or a beer. Go play outside, pet a dog, snuggle a cat. I will catch you on the flip side.